my name's Janelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and I'm here today for this keynote conversation with Matt Strauss, Chairman, Direct to Consumer and International, NBC Universal. Today's guest is responsible for all aspects of NBC Universal's streaming service Peacock and digital network Fandango. I literally do not have time to list all his achievements, but we're going to get into that over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. So please welcome Matt Strauss. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before we really get into things, whenever I have people as accomplished as you are, which is rare, I like to go back to the beginning and ask where this all started for you. Were you someone who grew up loving television, and how did you sort of break in? What was your first job in this industry?
Well, it's interesting. I feel very fortunate because a lot of people don't always know what they want to do in their career. And I was a child of the 70s. I kind of grew up as cable television was really starting to grow. And I had a fascination and passion for television as a kid. While other kids were collecting baseball cards, I was studying programming guides to understand like what was on what channel and trying to figure out why decisions were being made about how things were being scheduled. And as a kid, it always bothered me because I loved cartoons and I never understood why I couldn't watch cartoons whenever I wanted to watch them on TV. Like, why did TV have to work in such a one way linear? I wasn't able to articulate it this way, but like, why did it have to be on somebody else's schedule? And my parents would just say, that's the way it is, and go outside and play. And it always kind of stuck with me that, that TV was amazing, but it could be so much better. And I didn't really connect those dots until I graduated school and I got a job at ABC in New York City. And it was a great way for me to learn the business. And I was in the strategic planning group. And one of the things that I started to work on was the 5-year plan. And it gave me great visibility into all different parts of the network. And one of the things that was becoming very clear to me was that, the trends were increasingly people were going and watching more cable, and broadcast was going through a bit of a change. And I realized at that point I needed to like learn the cable business as well as the broadcast business. I needed to try to understand what was behind some of these consumer trends that were driving that change. And I ended up going to Cablevision. And it happened to have been just at the moment in time when cable was going through a digital transition where the technology was just starting to come into focus, which gave way to on-demand technology. So very fortuitous for me that not only like I was alive at this moment in time when the industry was going through such change, but I happened to have found a way to be a part of a change that was just starting to take place in the industry and tie it back to something I had been passionate about as a kid.
So you're like me. You remember when there were three broadcast networks, and a lot of them signed off the air at a certain point. Maybe you had a local station, because I try to tell people about this now, and they just look at me like I'm crazy.
I would stay awake many of those nights waiting for the stations to signal off. I couldn't get enough of it. But yes, I remember those times.
I mean, is it sort of crazy to you? Did you ever imagine you'd be really a pioneer in the evolution of on-demand video and in a position to influence streaming and on-demand entertainment? I mean, you probably didn't know what those words meant, back in the day, but it sounds like you sort of had these ideas.
Back in the day, it was called multimedia. That was the term that was being used, and a lot. I mean, there was like when I was at ABC, there was like a very very small group that was kind of thinking about what does multimedia even mean, and I was gravitated towards that as well, and trying to again really figure out like where do we think this is going to ultimately go from a consumer standpoint. And when I was at Cablevision and we started testing on-demand technology, I immediately knew this was lightning in a bottle. Like it was very clear to me once you give somebody the ability to watch what they want when they want it, even though it was a very crude technology, the interfaces were almost impossible to navigate. There was no content available, so we were pretty much using whatever we could find. But it didn't matter because you could just tell through the data and the research that like consumers were drawn to it. So to me, this was like just a very natural thing to kind of follow through, which is like, how can we take this to a next level? How do we continue to evolve this? And in a weird way, I thought a lot about like my future and my kids, and like one day I'm going to have kids, and one day if I can somehow improve how they get access to TV, and then they can enjoy TV and they can enjoy cartoons on their terms. Like for me, that was in a strange way what was driving me. It was like a passion to make it better for my own family and for everybody else. And that I never knew it was going to take me in the fully in the direction that it took me, but I just kind of followed the data and my passion in where I really believed the future was going.
I remember, like, my first job out of college was working at a local Fox affiliate, and I was joking about, like, "Well, wouldn't it be great if you could just watch whatever episode of The Simpsons you wanted, like, turn on the TV and find it?" And, like, people just stared at me, and I like to think it was a ridiculous thing to say at the time, but I like to just think I was ahead of my time.
You were definitely ahead of your time, and and obviously now it's almost impossible to imagine what television would be like, without being able to watch what you want, when you want, where you want. It's instant gratification. The irony is my kids don't even know what live TV is, or they didn't even know what live TV is. They only knew that from their environment, that everything was available on demand. And to me, that's amazing. That's the way it should be. It should be, giving you control on your terms.
Yeah, I don't wanna be that person, but I've often said to my nephews, like, "You don't know how lucky you are. Back in my day," you and then I catch myself because 'cause
You
I'm
start
curious.
to date yourself real fast, but yes, I feel the same way. When I speak to my kids, I'm like, wait, I sound like my grandfather, like how he used to talk to me. Um,
So true. So you are currently the chairman, direct to consumer and international at NBC Universal. Sort of in layman's terms, or not layman's terms, you're amongst peers here. What does that all entail?
Yeah, well, obviously NBC Universal is comprised of the broadcast network and a portfolio of cable networks, but we also distribute our content on platforms that we manage. Peacock being one of those platforms, Fandango and Vudu and Rotten Tomatoes being additional platforms. We also manage TV Everywhere, where pay TV subscribers can get access to our content through the NBC app or through the NBC Sports app, which is where we also make things like the Olympics available. So, any platform, any digital platform where we're distributing our programming direct to the consumer is really kind of part of the group that that I'm part of. And then in addition to that, we obviously also distribute our programming domestically, but we distribute our content and networks in over 150 territories around the world. So any international distribution is also part of the group that I manage. And the rationale for that really is because we're increasingly looking at everything we do through the lens of global. And
Mhm.
certainly as we take on and look to expand Peacock, especially not only in the United States, but around the world. For example, we announced we're launching Peacock in the UK, Italy, and Germany later this year. Having the ability to kind of start to strategically, lay out how this starts to kind of tie back in with our presence in all these other countries is a big benefit. And it made a lot of sense for us to have that all become part of one portfolio.
I want to sort of delve into Peacock because you hear the term streaming wars a lot. And in just 1 year, Peacock has become a key player. I mean, you actually started out of the gate really pretty fully formed. I again want to go back to the beginning and sort of learn how it all came about when you first started having these discussions and how you came up with the name and sort of what the strategy was and how you sort of maybe set out to differentiate Peacock in this landscape.
Well, before I came to Peacock, Steve Burke, who was the CEO of NBC Universal at the time, and Bonnie Hammer, they were really the architects of the name. And I know they did a lot of research on it, and Peacock was really meant to pay homage to NBC's heritage, but they also didn't want to call it NBC Plus because in many ways that would become limiting. If to the extent that we really wanted to position this as an aggregation platform, have access to content. Certainly, that's part of NBC Universal, but not limited to NBC Universal. There was an elegance in using the name Peacock, but there's also a challenge. I mean, it's a new brand. It's something that had to that we obviously had to kind of do a lot of marketing to try to establish that in a very crowded landscape. And credit to our marketing team, I think they did a really nice job in such a short amount of time. But it's interesting because when we were developing Peacock, I came to NBC 2 years ago, and we decided that we were going to launch in 2020, and of course the global pandemic happened. So not only were we admittedly late to the streaming landscape in what you would appropriately dub as the streaming wars, a very competitive landscape, but we were also given the curveball of doing it from home in this office. This is, where I'd been working for the past 18 or so months. And, what was amazing about it though is as competitive as the market is in streaming, we kind of recognize that the majority of the focus was really around ad-free premium subscription. And
Mhm.
there's a good reason for that. I mean, there's certainly a lot of demand for that. Services like Netflix have done an amazing job establishing themselves as a really premium ad-free experience, and you saw a lot of other streaming services circling in that area. And as a result, as more eyeballs were moving to streaming, it was becoming very clear that advertisers were kind of getting boxed out, that they weren't really able to participate in the streaming landscape associated with premium content. So that was kind of one thing that was becoming very clear to us. The other thing that was becoming very clear is that, people also were becoming more cost conscious around how much money they're willing to spend on streaming services. And we really believe that there was an opportunity to try to approach it through both lenses. One, position ourselves as a premium ad supported service, which we thought was a bit of a white space opportunity. And let's also position ourselves as an affordable option in the market, which is why we thought launching with a free tier would be, an important ingredient in how we were able to get scale quickly, which is something we needed to do as a new service. And in many ways that informed how we ultimately went to market with Peacock, which was to really, lean on free. Not because we believe that that's the only place that we can kind of position the service, but again, it was really as a tactic to get to scale. But we also offer a $5 tier, which gives customers access to a broader array of programming, and we also offer a $10 tier, which is an ad-free tier, because we know that there's a portion of the market that really only enjoys subscribing to a service if they don't have to be exposed to ads. So we tried to cover kind of the different components of where we really felt was the sweet spot for us. And I don't think we could have ever anticipated in such a short amount of time, we would have seen kind of the early success that we've been enjoying. I think we're clear eyed that we still have a very long way to go as we continue to build out the service. But we've publicly said we've gotten over 54 million signups for Peacock. All of our internal metrics that we were kind of holding ourselves accountable to, we've kind of had to go back to the drawing board and come up with new metrics because we blew the other ones out of the water. And it's exciting to be part of something that is growing, that's evolving. And for me personally, it's been 20 years in the making, because as we've been discussing, I've always had a passion for on demand, certainly that evolving, becoming more streaming. And for me, this is like the opportunity of a lifetime to have the ability to be part of this team.
I mean, launching a new service is difficult enough, but you did it in a global pandemic, as you mentioned. I am curious, if you ever thought about postponing, but also on the flip side, sometimes necessity is the mother of all invention. And maybe there were things you learned that you wouldn't have known otherwise. I'm thinking specifically because plug here, I'm friends with Amber Ruffin. And I remember her sort of like being excited by the idea that she wasn't going to have an audience when her show launched.
Well, Amber is insanely talented, and she has been a real bright spot for us. But to answer your question, we definitely had I guess the deck stacked against us, because like everybody, I mean, every service was obviously impacted by the pandemic. For us, we had the added challenge of we hadn't launched yet. So to your point, the entire team was kind of shelter in place. Most of our original productions got delayed. But again, that was going to be kind of the foundation of what we were going to use to launch, as well as the Olympics, which was going to be the kind of the promotional vehicle of how we were planning to launch Peacock. So, there was definitely a moment where, we were given the opportunity to delay the launch. I can tell you that there was nobody at the Peacock team, including myself, that took that seriously. We set out to launch. We quickly iterated and built the new muscle of how we had to operate working from home. And in a weird way, we thought that launching was like a positive, like it was a positive, for the company to kind of demonstrate that we could still do this. But we also thought in a way that it was a positive for the country. Like, even though on a very minor level, just providing people entertainment. I mean, like and I can tell you from my family, like we watched a lot of TV, over the past 18 months, and just giving consumers another choice, especially an affordable choice, we thought was important. So that pushed us forward. Again, I'm very fortunate. We just have an amazing team. We were able to get the service launched and scaled. And what we learned, early on was we had to innovate around the content we had, which was a lot of library programming, because all of our content, as I mentioned, got delayed from a production standpoint. But this is where there was a silver lining, because what we found out pretty quickly was that what we saw a lot of consumers gravitating towards was nostalgia, kind of a
Mm,
feeling of, almost comfort food, and through television. And we happen to have a lot of comfort food TV in the NBC Universal Library, and we just started programming and leaning more on our library. So we have over 60,000 hours of programming on Peacock. And for those first few months, it was shows that we were offering, whether it was, Everyone Loves Raymond or The King of Queens, or even some older shows that were just over indexing. And it gave me a whole new appreciation around how much people love our content,
mhm.
in a way that I don't think I fully appreciated. And that gave us a really, really good foundation while we continue to add more and more programming over the next couple of months.
Well, I mean, even some of your original shows sort of have a good nostalgic factor. I mean, Saved by the Bell, obviously. My favorite is Girls Five Eva, which takes me back to a nostalgic time in my life, and it really does nostalgia right.
Well, again, this is where, I'm fortunate to be part of an amazing company, because we have access to great talent. Whether it's Tina Fey, who obviously was behind Girls Five Eva. We have access to IP. Saved by the Bell, just to give you an example, that was a show where I know a lot of people thought, like, why would you reboot Saved by the Bell? It was, I got a lot of eye rolls, but it was
Mm,
done, in my opinion, in like such a clever way, really good writing, really good acting, and was on the top 10 list for a lot of critics for the year. And I think, again, it's looking at things a little bit differently, and trying to approach the programming on Peacock in a way that allows us to be edgier, certainly than what we would typically be able to do on NBC, and allow the talent to do what they do best, and giving them a
mhm.
new platform to be creative, and and bring new content to life in a way that we find is really resonating with consumers. You mentioned Amber Ruffin. just to kind of highlight, I mean, part of our strategy with Peacock was to not just kind of be another Me Too service. And another Me Too service, from my point of view, meant two things. One, limit yourself to really just focusing on specific categories like scripted dramas, movies, kids programming. I mean, these are all incredibly important in the streaming landscape. But what we found what was not happening as often was like, well, what about late night? What about unscripted? What about true crime? What about Latino and multicultural? What about sports and news? Like all the things that make TV so great in many ways was not really represented as prominently through the streaming services. And we
Hmm.
thought that that was something that played to our strengths. And, Amber was, an example of that, which was, well, let's build out a late night block and let's create a destination that people could tune into. But instead of necessarily having to go to a traditional television network, like let's try to tap into what we know is the behavior that people like, and let's bring that to streaming. And that's an area that we're continuing to explore. And it's also an opportunity that I think, we're able to tap into that can help differentiate us against some of the other streaming options in the market.
I actually wanted to ask about that because, Peacock does offer so much. You have this iconic library of shows and film, but you also do live news and sports and obviously original series. Not asking you to play favorites, but where do you sort of decide where to focus your efforts and I guess sort of place your bets?
It's a great question. I would say every day we get a little bit smarter about where to place our bets. It's interesting. We spoke a lot about on demand and the power of on demand. And again, it's something that I feel fortunate that I've had a hand to shape. And before NBC, I worked at Comcast and I ran our video business and our broadband business. So I kind of had a front row seat at really just being able to observe behavior. Like, how do people watch video? How do they make decisions? Doing ethnographic studies and really trying to, study, the behavior. And what was fascinating and frustrating to me was that as powerful as on demand had become, the overwhelming majority of video consumption in this country is still linear. It's still linear. It's still people tuning into sports and news and scrolling through a TV grid and landing on a show, and the next thing you're watching Jaws, even though it's halfway through. And there's a behavior that we're trying. We think we can kind of try to tap into, which is why on Peacock what you'll notice is that not only do we have a very robust on demand offering, but we also built out a channels offering, which was something that again a lot of people thought was kind of a like almost like a legacy. Why would you try to tap into that legacy mindset? Linear is the dinosaur, and that is not true. That behavior still exists today. There's something magical about TV, which is you come home, you sit on the couch, you turn on the TV, and sometimes you just want to lean back and just watch TV and not think about it. And I think that that is something that we're really trying to also tap into on Peacock. So we're trying to create both, build out a service that we think could kind of capitalize off of both of those dimensions. And that's why we're leaning into sports, which is you'll find the NFL on Peacock, you'll find the WWE. We did a deal with them, which we're excited about. Premier League, the Olympics. So sports is certainly a very very important piece. We're also continuing to lean very heavily into knowing that movies are an important component of any streaming service, which is why we did a deal to take back our pay one rights, which next year the pay one universal movies, which are the first window after they're in theaters, will be coming to Peacock. But it also allows us to experiment with doing day and date movies, which is what we've been doing with Halloween Kills, Boss Baby
Yeah.
2. We also announced we're going to be doing some original movies. And then we're also aggressively investing in doing more TV shows, primarily scripted, because we know scripted is important to acquisition and it's a key consideration to what and how people make their decisions. And we have such a great library to start with that, making bigger bets on bigger scripted dramas, we think is also a big opportunity for us. And that's where, we've done shows like Dr. Death. We announced we're doing a reboot of Bel Air, which is a scripted drama version of Bel Air. David E. Kelly is doing a show for us called The Missing. Sam Esmail is doing a show for us, which is a reboot of Battlestar Galactica. So, we're starting to really focus on the areas that we think play to our strengths. But there's one other theme of all of this, which is this notion of really trying to target fandoms and existing fan bases. And however we need to target them, whether it's through sports or movies or dramas or unscripted reality, being able to target them in a way and then that allows Peacock to become the home and the best place for fans. And everyone's a fan of something. And I think that what we can do, and one of the benefits of coming late, is you can not only find new ways to target those fans through content, but you can also look through product. And how can we build a product that goes beyond what you would expect to really super serve fandoms? And that's an area that we're really trying to unpack as we continue to build out the service in the coming months and years.
I mean, Halloween Kills was such a coup. I just remember reading that and being so excited about that, and still did amazing at the box office as well.
Yeah, well, look, a lot of credit to Jason Blum and Donna Langley and the team. I think there's always been an understanding that there are cohorts of people who, they might just not go to the theater for whatever reason, but they would still like to watch a movie at home, in that earlier window. And I think the pandemic has given us a bit of a sandbox to experiment and do things that would have been even harder to do, previously. And to me, Halloween Kills is a perfect example of a win-win. It, like you said, it was number one in the box office. It was number one on Peacock. I mean, it drove the Peacock app to the number one spot in the in Apple's iOS store. I mean, across all apps, and a lot of that was because of the power of Halloween. So there's a recipe there that we're going to continue to explore around. How do we get the right piece of content to the right consumer at the right time? And it's really just about choice. It's giving people choice, and that to me is nothing but positive.
Hmm. So, with so many services, how many do you think can and will survive? I know, obviously Quibi only lasted a year, which actually I really liked a lot of their content, and I don't know if there's examples you can learn from that. Not meaning to just pick on them because we don't need to do that, but also, are there things that you think can help strengthen your odds for survival?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a couple of ways to answer that question. I think maybe one kind of narrative has been, in this context of the streaming wars, like who are going to be the winners, who are going to be the losers. I actually don't think that's the right way to look at it. It's a little bit like saying, um, in the broadcast world, which of the broadcast networks are going to be the winners and which ones are going to be the losers. And what we found, like through history, is they were all winners. I mean, every broadcast, there wasn't one broadcast network, as we know. There were four, and they were all very successful and continue to be successful. And then you can extrapolate that to the cable network landscape. Which cable
Mhm.
networks? And there are hundreds of cable networks, and many of them are successful and profitable in how they're reaching audiences. So I don't think that we should assume in the streaming world that that there's going to be three winners. I think there's going to be many winners, and I think that that's really indicative of consumers wanting choices, and that has never changed. I mean, you've only seen, over time, over the past 50 years, that consumers continue to gravitate towards wanting more choices and more control. And in many ways, streaming is just tapping into that desire that has existed for a very, very long time. So, I look at it more around, what is the value that we're offering the market? In many ways, I don't see us as competing against a lot of streaming services. I think we could be more complementary and positioning ourselves as a premium, affordable, ad supported service. we think is not only a great value, but is a compliment for somebody who might want to subscribe to Disney or might want to subscribe to Netflix or might want to subscribe to another streaming service, and that's okay. I mean, again, I think that it's about finding audience and giving them more options and something that they really find a value. And I'm very confident that we can do that through Peacock. There's one other answer which I'll give you, which is maybe more of an academic answer, which is the average consumer in the United States spends about $85 a month on video, and it's a very large number. I mean, it's probably the third or fourth highest bill for most people in the country after their mortgage and their cell phone bill and maybe their car payment. Like the amount of money people spend on video is enormous. And if ATV continues to go through a transformation, which we've all been witnessing over the past several years, I think you're just going to find that that share of wallet starts to move into other ways that people are going to be enjoying and purchasing content. So I don't think people who are cutting the cord are going to necessarily find that they're going to be saving money over time. I think it's not likely going to result in saving money, but it's going to certainly result in people having more choice, more flexibility. But I think that you're going to still find yourself in the future. The average household, I think, is still going to be spending quite a bit of money on video. And there's no reason that we can't position ourselves to try to carve out $5 of that with Peacock.
So I would love to know what you're watching on TV because I hear you watch everything. What are some of your favorite shows? And they can be on Peacock, but also other shows.
I do watch a lot of TV, but I'm equal opportunistic. I I enjoy other streaming services, and I there's some look. There's no better time to be alive than right now if you like television. There's more high quality video available now than there has ever been in our history. So it's amazing. So like I'm following on Squid Games. Like I'm binge watching that. I'm watching Ted Lasso. I'm watching Girl in the Woods on Peacock. I'm watching La Brea on NBC. I'm flipping through the channels. I'm watching Survivor. I I love just I love just being a consumer of video, and I also I like to watch what my kids are watching, and well, I shouldn't say I like to. I like watching it with them. I don't always like what they're watching, but I try to watch what they're watching. And there's just not enough time in the day, but there's no shortage of good choices. And certainly, as we grow Peacock, we really, really do believe that we could position ourselves as one of those high quality choices in the market. And we've got so much great content that's coming. Like whatever success we've been able to scratch at this point, what encourages us is that we know what's coming, and it's going to be even such a kind of a more robust offering than what we've been able to offer to date, which we know consumers are going to really really love.
I actually wanted to ask about that. I don't know how much you're allowed to say, but what are you really looking forward to that's coming down the pike that you can talk about?
Well, the one that I'm really excited about is the reboot with Bel Air. This is one where if obviously you're familiar with the show, it was a comedy. To the new take around looking at it like through the lens of like a drama, and it's edgy and kind of the story of how we found it. There was a trailer that was produced that was put on YouTube, and that was really all we saw. We never saw anything else. We just saw the trailer, the inspiration, kind of the fresh take on the show, and we picked it up. We did a deal, and Will Smith is involved in the production of it, which is incredibly exciting, and it's just coming along fantastic. So that is one that I am really really excited about, and I think it's going to be a real brand defining moment for Peacock.
I mean, that raises another question, which is where are you sort of finding content and creators? I mean, the idea that, a YouTube video could find its way to you and lead to an actual show. I guess it's not that crazy, but with so much out there and so many talented people, where do you sort of focus your energies?
Well, again, I know I might sound a little redundant. We have a really good team. We have such good people across the company. And when it comes to programming, we have Susan Rovner, who is the chairman of all of our programming for NBC Universal, including Peacock. And she came from Warner Brothers, and now has been a fantastic partner. Val Borland and Francis Berwick, who really have been partnering with us both on content that's on NBC and our cable networks, and how we might be able to tap into that IP to bring more of that fan base over to Peacock, whether it's doing a version of Below Deck for Peacock, or doing a version of The Real Housewives for Peacock, or even just thinking differently about acquisitions in the market. They are also fantastic partners. This is one of the benefits of being part of the company, which is we've got access to such amazing talent, and there's no shortage of people who we're speaking to, but also who come to us with ideas. And it's just allows us to, in many ways, see some of the best of the best. And then you have to make the difficult decisions around really targeting the ideas that we think are going to resonate with the audiences that we're trying to reach on Peacock. But we've got just some fabulously talented people who are out there helping us make some of those decisions and navigate all the creative options in the market.
When someone comes in to pitch to you, obviously they want to be working with you, but I'm sort of curious, what do you sort of say that Peacock can offer that maybe another place couldn't?
Well, I think one of the things that has been the hallmark of NBC Universal is early on they built something internally called Symphony, and what it means, if you're not familiar with it, is we have theme parks, we have movie studios, we've got obviously our broadcast and cable networks, we have our digital properties. We're also part of Comcast, so we have our cable company, and the Xfinity platforms, which reach over 30 million customers. We also have our sister company Sky in Europe. So across the company, there are hundreds of millions of touch points, and we have been able to organize ourselves in a way, in when we get behind an initiative, how do we use that as an engine, a promotional engine, where every part of the company is leaning into a priority. And the Olympics is maybe one of the best examples of this, where when we're during an Olympics, our entire company lights up across every single touch point. It's an always on. It's us aligning around what we call the gold, silver, and bronze symphony initiatives, and Peacock is a gold priority. So what that really means is that we recognize that we are the new kid on the block. We recognize that we are growing, and we're continuing to grow. But the rocket fuel that we have is I've got this entire company behind Peacock, which is enabling us to do marketing and promotion in a way that I don't know if others could really replicate, or it would cost a significant amount of money from a marketing standpoint. So we really could put our shoulder behind specific shows, events, and do it in a way that shines a light on it and can drive audience to it and awareness. And I think that we've got a track record that demonstrates that we can execute as well, if not better, than any company when it comes to really driving audience and engagement.
Yeah. I sort of just want to do a check-in on the state of the industry, I guess. Where do you think this business is now? Where are we headed? Very broad question, but
Yeah. Well, I think about this a lot, as you could imagine. Like, this is such like it's like one of the most fascinating questions around trying to predict where you think things are going to go, right? And interestingly, my perspective on it is that you typically find that history repeats itself, just in a slightly different in different ways. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but We talked about broadcast and the importance of broadcast, which then gave way to cable. And cable was obviously about giving consumers more choice. And we ended up with 1,000 channels, and then on demand and DVRs were about control and giving people the ability to navigate all those choices and do it in a way that was personalized. And and streaming in many ways, as broadband has proliferated, is now just giving consumers one more option, which is buying content on their terms. Like, what is the content I want to watch? And I only want to pay for what I want to watch. And in many ways, the bundle was very kind of efficient, but it also meant that you were accessing and paying for things that you didn't necessarily value. And streaming is giving this perception of choice. What I think is going to likely happen is, if the last 30 or so years was kind of like this big bang, this explosion of choices and control and streaming, I do think that you're going to start to see consolidation. And
Hmm.
and what I mean by that is, you know, the negative of what we have created as an industry is fragmentation, confusion of, like, I want to watch a show, where is it? What service is it on? Where are the prior seasons if I want to catch up? The fragmentation of choice is actually still a very perplexing challenge that I think is going to result in more and more services starting to find ways, like, of bundling. And I think we're going to actually I think we're at the tipping point of what is going to become the new bundle, where instead of just bundling linear networks, I think you're going to start to see increasingly more and more consolidation and bundling of streaming services. And you're already seeing examples of this happening with vertically integrated media companies. But I think increasingly, as people sign up for broadband, I would expect that the bundle is going to get recreated, but it's going to be recreated through the lens of streaming apps. And the more streaming apps you take, the bigger the discount. And then the ability to navigate these apps more seamlessly is going to also continue to evolve. And in many ways, I think it's going to look a lot like TV. It's going to look a lot more like things were in the past. Just, I think that we're going to go through this reincarnation, but that obviously is going to take time to play itself out. But that would be my prediction in what I think the next 5-10 years is going to look like.
Well, I love the saving money part. I'm for that. Finally, I know that this is probably something you get asked a lot, but do you have any advice for people who are looking to start or build a career in media and entertainment?
um, I'm so fortunate because I've had so many mentors along the way in my career. And again, I define a mentor as somebody who, like, formally, like, kind of has taken me under their wing and has been a sounding board or giving me advice. But I've also had mentors of just people I've observed who maybe don't
Mhm.
even know me, but I kind of observe how they make decisions, or I observe how they interact, I observe how they get consensus. And I try to take some of those traits and learn from them and adopt them as I grow. And one of the things that my very first job at ABC, I was a junior financial analyst, which was kind of interesting because I had very little interest in finance, but it was the only job I was able to get, and I took it. And it turned out to be probably the best place for me to start, because I realized that whether you're a creative, whether you're in front of the camera, whether you're behind the camera, a lot of decisions come down to money. They come down to, how are decisions made? And I would say, wherever you're coming into this industry, be a student of the business. Understand the business, understand how decisions are made, understand how profits are made, understand how content is licensed and windowed, and all the different nuances of how content gets distributed. Only because I think it will help you have a better appreciation for whatever it is you're going to contribute to this industry. Try to expand your aperture and really be a student. And a student never stops learning, right? A student is always learning. And I think that would be the best advice I can give somebody who's just starting out.
That's great. It actually made me think how I also kind of came in sideways. I started in advertising, which was not my intention, but I'm so glad I know about how all that stuff works now. Well, it's probably changed dramatically, but I still feel like I at least understand the language.
It's important, and again, I think it will only help you in whatever field you end up really kind of gravitating towards. There's very little downside to understanding different aspects of the business, and it will just allow you to be better at whatever it is you're going to pursue in our industry.
And I mentioned it probably feels like a long time because it's been in the making. It's really only been a little over a year since you launched. What is it like sort of looking back where you were a year ago to today?
Um, it's I got to remind myself it's only been a little over a year because it feels like a dog year. Like, it's every week, there's so much that changes. I feel like, we executed as a team, and whenever you launch something new, even if you really believe deeply it's going to be successful, like, you don't really know until you launch it, until you see how consumers react to it. And, I felt like we did the best we could do. And to see the reaction and the positive feedback that we've been getting, it's only been encouraging us. And I feel like we've climbed a mountain to get to the point that we're at right now with Peacock. But I also remind our team, base camp at Everest is 19,000 feet. So you can climb 19,000 feet and, it can feel really good, but you still have a long way to go to get up that mountain. So I feel like we've been energized over the past year. We've tried to pivot and make changes along the way. And that's become part of our culture at Peacock, which is, kind of is what we rally around, which is the pivot. Nothing stays static. Expect things are going to change, and be prepared to move where the market has to move or where you need the market to move. And when you go in with that mindset, and when you're building a culture that's built off of that, it allows you to be really opportunistic and flexible. And I think that that's been a part of our secret, to how we've gotten to the point at this stage of our development.
You guys came on so strong out of the gate, honestly. I really wanna congratulate you on a great launch and a great year. I wanna thank you so, so much for being here today, and thank you everyone for watching at home.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Janelle. It's been a pleasure.